The fire flared off. The scarf turned to ash. Suddenly, the flames turned blue. Baba Ewe stopped chanting. His eyes widened. No, 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 no. Something is wrong. The fire roared higher. Smoke twisted into a shape. A woman's face appeared. Mama Ireti. She smiled. You think you can bind justice? The flames exploded. Baba Ewe burst into flames, screaming. Fola was thrown backwards across the room, crashing into a wooden wall. Then, darkness. When Fola opened his eyes, he was back in the penthouse. No one knew how he got there. Obinna was called in a corner, muttering the Lord's Prayer. Chuka was back too, but he was different. His eyes were wide open, but he wasn't really there. He kept repeating the same words. I left, but I never left. Fola tried to stand. Then behind him, a shadow moved. Mama Ireti stood there. She was holding the ancient mirror. But this time, it didn't show their reflections. It showed something far more terrifying. Their graves. Her voice was soft, but filled with finality. Dawn has come, she said, and so has your reckoning. The city of Lagos slowly stirred awake. Birds chirped faintly over the rooftops. The sky was painted with the pale grey of early dawn, but inside the penthouse, morning brought no peace, only silence and fear. The three men, Fola, Obinna and Chuka, lay on the cold marble floor like broken dolls. Their breath was shallow, their eyes swollen from crying. In front of them stood Mama Ireti, still and silent, powerful. Behind her, the mirror shimmered, but it didn't reflect the room. Instead, it reflected something far more disturbing. Images of pain, screams, hunger, burning homes and forgotten lives. Fola's cheek was badly burnt from the failed ritual. His skin had blistered along the line of his face, and the pain made him groan with every movement. Obinna was shaking uncontrollably. His body was soaked in sweat. He was saying something, but no words came out of his lips. And Chuka was whispering nonsense. His mind seemed far away. He stared into nothingness, repeating the same sentence over and over. I left, but I'm still here. I'm still here. I left. Mama Ireti looked at them with eyes that had seen centuries of suffering. You have tasted the beginning, she said, her voice calm like deep water. But true judgment begins now. She raised her right hand. The mirror began to hum softly. Then a strange wind rushed through the sealed penthouse like an invisible door had been flung open to another world. Curtains lifted, the chandelier swung, and paper scattered across the floor. You have one final chance, she said. One of you must carry the pain of everyone you hurt. The men stared at her, confused and frightened. Carry their pain? What does that mean? Obinna whispered. Mama Ireti turned her gaze towards him. It means you will become them. Every victim, you will feel their hunger, their heartbreak, their helplessness. If you survive it, you will carry their truth for the rest of your life. Fola swallowed. And the others? If no one chooses, then I take you all. The world will forget you ever lived. Your families will bury shadows. No one moved. No one volunteered. So she extended both hands. The mirror trembled and pulled all three men into it. They screamed. Inside the mirror wasn't glass. It was memory, pain, justice, and now they had to leave it. Obinna opened his eyes to find himself in a small cracked mud house in Ilorin, but he wasn't Obinna anymore. He was a woman, a widow, Mama Kehinde. Her hands were rough, her bones ached, her stomach rumbled with hunger. In the corner, two children cried weakly. They looked starved, hollow-eyed. He stumbled into an empty table, no food. She picked up a small phone with trembling hands and dialed a number. It rang, then a voice answered. Obinna recognized it immediately, his own voice from the past. Hello? Please, sir, she begged. My children haven't eaten. You said the returns will come. I just need something, anything. Madam, you should have read the fine print. This is not charity. Then the call ended. She, Obinna, collapsed on the ground, crying uncontrollably. The children cried louder. Then came a knock at the door. The landlord was evicting them. The house would be seized, her husband's land was gone, and everything was lost to a lie. As she screamed, the walls caught fire. Obinna felt the flames eat into his skin. Fola awoke in a small dirty hostel room. The mattress was stained. The ceiling fan was broken. The heat was unbearable. He stood up and walked into a broken mirror. He saw someone else's face. He was now Tunji, a 300 level student from UNN. Tunji had invested his school fees in quick funds and lost everything. Outside, his roommates laughed, celebrating the end of semester exams, but he couldn't join them. He had been locked out of his student portal and he had not written a single paper. He had dropped out in secret. Fola felt his heart sinking. Tunji's mother had borrowed that money from a cooperative. Fola, as Tunji pulled a hoodie over his head, walked past the laughing roommate and headed towards a building under construction. He climbed 5 floors. He stood at the edge, wind blowing through his hair. One tear rolled down his cheek. "I just wanted to help my mom," he whispered. He stepped forward, he fell, and everything went black. Chuka blinked and found himself in a dusty wooden stall at Balogun Market, but he was no longer himself. He was Iya Aronke, a market woman who had sold everything she had to invest in crypto booster. The table was empty, no pepper, no yam, no onions. Passers-by laughed at the walk-by. See her, all her money don't fly. She, Chuka, looked at them. Every single face looked like his, and every voice sounded like his own. She began to scream, clawing at her own face, trying to tear the memory away. She grabbed her chest, pain shooting through her left arm. A heart attack, and suddenly, darkness. The mirror spat them out one by one back at the penthouse. They landed on the cold floor, groaning, crying, gasping for air. Their clothes were drenched in sweat, their eyes wide with trauma. They had lived the lives they once destroyed. Mama Ireti stood over them. Her voice was gentle now. "No amount of money can undo what you did, but truth can begin the healing." She knelt beside them, not as a judge, not as a spirit, but as a mother. "You weren't born evil," she said quietly, "but you chose evil." Obinna raised his hand, tears falling freely. "I'll confess," he whispered. "I'll tell everyone, everything." Fola nodded. "I'll give it all back, every last kobo." Chuka couldn't speak, he just wept. A live stream went viral later that day. Millions of Nigerians watched from homes, offices, buses and roadside shops. 3 men sat in white native attire, handcuffed. EFCC officers stood behind them. Chuka spoke first, his voice trembling. "My name is Chuka. We created quick funds. It was a fraud. We stole over 800 million. I'm deeply sorry." Fola continued. "We have returned 312 million so far. We are ready to cooperate fully. We beg our victims for mercy." Obinna's voice broke as he spoke. "Please forgive us. Let no one ever do what we did. Fast money ends in sorrow. We are walking corpses." The world watched. Behind the cameras, unseen by everyone but them, Mama Ireti stood. She smiled. Justice had begun. 1 week later, the video of the syndicate's confession spread like wildfire. It was everywhere. Over 5 million views in just 3 days. Radio shows talked about it. Pastors used it in sermons. Schools played it during morning assembly as a warning. Even newspapers carried the headlines. But while the rest of the world watched in shock and fascination, the real victims lived with the scars. For some, the money they lost already ruined their lives. For others, the pain became fuel for them to rise again. In the heat of Mushin Market, Mama Ronke adjusted her colorful gele and arranged a fresh basket of tomatoes on her wooden store. People walked by, smiling and greeting her. Just a few months ago, she was unrecognizable, pain, broken and depressed. She had sold her husband's only land to invest in quick funds. When the scam collapsed, she lost everything. The shame nearly drove her mad. But when the brown envelope with 300,000 naira was returned to her, half of what she had lost, she didn't waste a second. she started again, small but with hope. When she watched the confession on her neighbor's smartphone, she shook her head bitterly. God catch them, she muttered, but make the no think say e end there, others still dey do am. Her neighbor, Aja Bisi, nodded knowingly. You don't see that new one? Golden root coin. E be like Yahoo mixed with miracle water. Mama Ronke spat to the side. Ireti go reach them. In the quiet neighborhood in Ilorin, Aminat stood in front of an abandoned building, its walls black from fire and the windows shattered. This was where her brother, Tunji, had jumped from. He had been bright, kind and full of dreams. When he invested his school fees in quick funds, he thought he was helping the family, but when everything disappeared and shame followed him everywhere, he had climbed to the 5th floor and never came down alive. The family buried him in a closed casket. Aminat held a candle in one hand and a faded picture of him in the other. He just wanted to help, she whispered. She had watched the confessions alone. She cried, but something inside her didn't break. It burned. She picked up Tunji's old laptop, which he was using to practice web design. Now Aminat was learning to code. She joined a forum where victims shared names of suspected scammers. One post caught her attention. Green Mind Investment, beware. She clicked on the profile of one of its promoters, Ayola Adebayo. Her heart stopped. That name, she remembered it. He had mentored Chuka, one of the people who had taught the syndicate their tricks. He was still free. Ayola Adebayo sipped expensive Hennessy in a luxurious lounge in Ikoyi. He wore a fine Italian suit and a Rolex even shinier than Chuka's. He read the news and smiled. Chuka has always been too emotional. He said aloud, Fola too soft, Obina too loud. They were bound to fail. But he had evolved. His new scam, Green Mind Investment, was nearly perfect. A real office, paid influencers, photoshopped partnership with fake American companies, even monthly seminars to show credibility. Ireti can't touch me, he laughed quietly. That night, he returned to his mansion in Banana Island. As he stepped into the room, he noticed something odd. A candle was burning, alone, on the center of his table. He frowned. There was no power cut, no wind, nothing. Then he saw the mirror and the woman standing beside it. She wore white, her eyes glowed. Mama Ireti. I thought you were done, he said, stumbling backward. She smiled gently. Justice is like fire. You don't end it, you only spread it. The door slammed shut behind him. In Benin City, a young woman named Sandra Eweka stood confidently before a crowd of over 300 people at a community hall. She held a microphone in one hand and her pen in the other. I lost my entire school fees to quick funds, she said. I cried, I blamed myself, but then I made a decision. I wouldn't be silent. The crowd clapped. I created a blog. I shared my story. In 2 months, I helped expose 3 more frauds. One of them is already in police custody. The crowd stood up and cheered. At the back of the room, a woman in white watched silently. When Sandra stepped off the stage, she heard a soft whisper near her ear. Keep going. Justice runs in your blood now. She turned quickly, but no one was there. Just a faint scent of bitter leaf and smoke. Mama Ireti wasn't a spirit anymore. She had become a symbol, a movement. Her justice has entered hearts. Now it lived in Sandra, in Aminat, in Mama Ronke. She had become the voice of the voiceless and the hand of those who couldn't strike back. Her presence moved through the country like quiet fire. Online fraudsters panicked. Fake accounts were deleted. Some scammers turned themselves in, too scared to sleep, too afraid to close their eyes. In the grand glass-walled mansion, nestled in the hills of Asokoro in Abuja, a woman stood in front of her vanity mirror. Her skin glowed like polished bronze under the soft lighting. Her name was Vera Obasi. To the world, she was a celebrated philanthropist, a crypto genius and founder of Cedar Rise Global Investment. Her face graced magazine covers. Her quotes were shared at business summits. Her charity work was praised on the television. She was the darling of the rich and the dream of the poor. But behind the flawless image was a dark truth. She was a master con artist. Cedar Rise was not built on innovation, it was built on deception, just like Chuka and the others, but smarter, colder, and more careful. She scammed everyone: struggling mothers, tech-savvy youths, greedy politicians, even religious leaders who unknowingly endorsed her schemes. And yes, she knew of Mama Ireti, but unlike the others, she was not afraid. Not yet. Vera applied her lipstick, admiring herself. Then she froze. Her reflection stopped moving. Her hand was still lifting the lipstick, but the mirror, her reflection, was paused. And then it turned its head, smiled, and spoke. "It's your turn." The light flickered. Her phone screen cracked with a sharp snap. The AC unit began to blow smoke. Then slowly, the heavy doors to her bedroom swung open. No wind, no footsteps, but she knew. She turned slowly and saw her, Mama Ireti, dressed in glowing white, hair floating as if underwater. Her eyes were no longer glowing red, but black, bottomless, and endless. Vera took a deep breath, then smiled boldly. "I've been expecting you." "You don't scare me," Vera said coolly. "I didn't start this game, I just played it better." "You played it colder," Mama Ireti replied, her voice calm. "Even the desperate still have hearts, but you have only hunger." Vera walked across the room with elegance, picking up a glass of wine. "So what now? You want me to scream like chooks? Cry like a baby? I don't do regrets." "You don't need to scream," Mama Ireti said softly. "You only need to see." The mirror behind Vera shimmered with lights. Vera laughed. "You want me to look at victims, their tweets, their tears? I have already seen them. I read every message. I studied their pain." Mama Ireti's eyes narrowed. "Then watch this." Vera's body stiffened. Suddenly she was no longer in her mansion. She was inside the mirror, inside her own story. Not her current life, but her childhood. She saw herself as a small girl, barefooted in a flooded neighborhood, selling chin-chin in traffic. Her mother stood nearby, coughing blood, begging drivers for help. She saw herself again, now 15 years old, sitting across from a corrupt WAEC official who demanded her body in exchange for a passing result. She watched as her mother scraped together 200,000 naira and sent it to a man who promised US visas, but he disappeared. Her mother collapsed in the hospital waiting room and never woke up. Vera screamed in the darkness, clutching her chest. "I did what I had to do," she yelled. "I built my empire from pain. The world eats people like me." Mama Ireti appeared beside her in the mirror's dark void. "I know your pain," she said gently, "but you didn't pass on survival. You passed on suffering." Vera jolted awake, back in her mansion. She lay on the cold floor, makeup smudged, tears streaming. "I didn't want to be a monster, but I did. I became one of them." Mama Ireti stepped forward, not in anger, but in silence. Then she said, "You are the final key." Vera wiped her face. "What does that mean?" "You have lived both sides, the prey and the predator. If you confess, if you return what you stole, if you speak boldly and openly, your voice will echo louder than theirs. You won't just free yourself, you will break the system." Vera trembled, then slowly nodded. "I'll do it." Vera Obasi appeared on TV channels, sitting between two EFCC officers. Her hair was uncovered, no makeup, her face real and raw, being watched by millions. She looked straight into the camera. "My name is Vera Obasi. I'm a fraudster. I created Cedar Rise Global to exploit people's trust and desperation. I scammed thousands. I'm ready to face justice and return what I stole." The country froze. Some people cheered, some wept, some raged, but something extraordinary happened. Like dominoes falling, 53 other fraudsters turned themselves in over the next few months. Men and women who had smiled in ads and flown in private jets now came forward, weeping, shaking and confessing. Some said they had dreams of a woman in white. Others said their laptops wiped themselves clean overnight. A few woke up to the scent of bitter leaves in their room and a single word written on their mirrors, confess. At a small village school in Ekiti, a curious girl raised her hand during a story lesson. "Ma," she asked her teacher, "is Mama Ireti real?" The teacher smiled warmly. "She's real anywhere truth lives. She's in the voice that rise up, in the hands that restore, in the eyes that refuse to look away." Outside, beneath a mango tree near the school, an old woman in white sat silently, watching, smiling. Her work was not finished, but for now, there was peace. Once upon a time, in the red dust village of Umokoro, there lived a girl named Adaeze, a girl who once believed her father would do anything to protect her. He used to call her Nwa Mama, meaning my good child. He used to carry her on his back during the market days. He used to sing to her when she had fever at night. But love is a fragile thing in the face of secrets. And the day Adaeze turned 16, her father's love began to rot. "Adaeze, my daughter," Obinna said with a smile, "you've grown into a woman. Very soon, you'll be in your husband's house." Adaeze was shocked. She stared at her father, confused. She never expected him to say something like that, at least not at her age. It didn't feel like a joke, it felt serious. Later that day, she told her mother what her father had said. Ngozi smiled and waved her hand. "Don't mind him, he's just pulling your legs." But 1 month later, everything changed. They came for her early, before the dew had dried from the grass. They said she was lucky. They said her husband was powerful, that Chief Okem had chosen her out of all the girls in the village. Adaeze stood still, completely shocked. She didn't know what to say or do. She never believed her father truly meant everything he was saying. At first, she thought of running away. Chief Okem was old enough to be her grandfather. The idea of marrying him made her stomach turn. But then she pursed. Running away wouldn't end well. "I have to stay. I have to know what all this thing is about and where it is going to lead to." Right there and then, Adaeze made a decision. She would stay, or she would not stay quiet. She had a plan. They dressed her up like a bride, but she felt like a sacrifice, and in many ways, that was exactly what she was. Her mother watched from the doorway, biting her bottom lip to stop herself from crying. She had begged Obinna, her husband, Adaeze's father, to not do this, but the man would not listen. "You know what I stand to lose if I back down now?" he snapped. "That man holds things that could destroy me. Do you want your children to be fatherless by disgrace?" She didn't answer because deep down she feared it was already too late, even though she didn't understand what her husband was saying. No one knew what Adaeze had overheard. No one saw her creeping behind the hut weeks ago, barefoot, listening to her father argue with Chief Okem in the dark. No one saw the way her hands shook when she had her name spoken like an object, a deal, a prize. "She's young and untouched. It will seal the deal," Chief Okem said, "and you will never speak of the shrine again." That was the night Adaeze died on the inside. So on the day of the wedding, when they brought her to sit beside Chief Okem under the canopy, her eyes were empty. The drummers played, the elders smiled, her father gave a speech, and then Adaeze started laughing. Not a shy laugh, not a joyful laugh, a wild, terrifying laugh that made even the children run. She fell to the ground, rolled in the dust, whispered strange words and clapped like a monkey. People screamed. The ceremony stopped immediately. The bride had gone mad, or so they thought. But her mother saw through it. She saw the look in her daughter's eyes. This wasn't madness. This was protection. This was strategy. That was the only way Adaeze knew how to say no without being buried alive by family shame. After the wedding broke apart, people stopped coming to the house. The compound was quiet, but not peaceful. The kind of quiet that carried shame and fear. The kind that made people look at the ground when they passed by your gate. Adaeze no longer spoke. She no longer smiled. She no longer responded to her name. She sat under the guava tree for hours, barefoot, hair loose, lips cracked, and eyes far away. Sometimes she clapped her hands and laughed for no reason. Other times she cried in the middle of the night, rolling in the dust. The villagers whispered, "She's mad. The chief has used her for ritual," while some said she had been touched by evil spirits. But her mother, Ngozi, didn't know what to believe. She sat every evening by the window, watching her daughter. Is this madness, or is Adaeze hiding something? That night, Adaeze's father Obinna couldn't sleep. He paced the room, sweating, shaking, whispering to himself. He remembered how she screamed during the wedding, how she looked straight into his eyes and shouted words that made his heart stop. "The gods saw what you and Chief Okim did." She said it clearly, loudly in front of everyone. What did she mean? Obinna knew the secret he carried, a terrible one, something from many years ago, and now his daughter was saying things she had no business knowing. Flashback to many years ago, Obinna stood outside a small hut in the dark, watching the widow Uloma sleeping with her baby beside her. He had already done the unthinkable. He had helped poison her husband, Chijioke, because he wanted Uloma for himself. "It is done," Chief Okim said. "Now you can chase the wife freely." Obinna didn't reply. He smiled lightly. Weeks passed. Obinna visited the widow Uloma. He brought yam, salt, money. He called it help, but it wasn't help. It was hunger. He wanted her badly, more than he had ever wanted anything, even his wife. But Uloma refused him. Even in pain, she stood strong. "My husband just died. Leave my house." Obinna felt shame and anger, but she refused him over and over, until one night he forced himself inside Uloma's house. Uloma screamed. She tried to fight even while trying to protect her little child, but Obinna was stronger than the both of them. She hit her head on the wall. The child kicked once and then went still. Both of them died before morning. Obinna had buried it deep, gave land to Chief Okim to stay silent, pretended to be innocent, and now his daughter, his blood, was acting like she knew. Back in the present, Obinna opened the window and saw Adaeze in the moonlight. She was sitting on the ground, drawing something in the dust. He walked slowly towards her. She didn't look up, she just kept drawing. When he got closer, he looked down and saw what it was. A figure of a man standing over a woman lying on the ground, a small child beside her. He gasped. Adaeze turned slowly. Her eyes were calm, and then she laughed. Loud, mad and wild laughter. Obinna stepped back, shaking. He couldn't breathe. Back in the house, Ngozi tried to feed Adaeze. She sat by her side, gently spooning food into her mouth. "My daughter, please eat. Say something." Adaeze just stared ahead, and then she whispered softly, "If I talk, someone will die." Ngozi dropped the spoon. "What did you say?" But Adaeze had already crawled into the corner, hugging her knees, and started laughing again. Ngozi stood there frozen. Tears filled her eyes and she touched her chest. God, what is happening in this house? Later that night, Obinna had a nightmare. He saw Uloma in a white cloth holding a dead child. She pointed at him. He woke up screaming, his heart pounding. He walked outside again and saw Adaeze staring at him, not smiling, not laughing, just watching, quiet, still and dangerous. 3 weeks had passed since Adaeze's wedding fell apart, and still she spoke to no one. Still she walked like someone lost in another world. Still she laughed at nothing and screamed at midnight. But something was changing, not in Adaeze, but in her mother. Ngozi was watching more closely now, paying attention to details. And one evening, after Adaeze had fallen asleep on the veranda, Ngozi sat beside her husband and asked quietly, "Obinna, I want to ask you something and I want you to tell me the truth." Obinna looked up, his hands shaking slightly. "What is it?" he asked. Ngozi's voice was calm. "Is there anything I should know that you are hiding from me?" Obinna's face went pale. "What kind of question is that?" he said, but his voice cracked. His hands trembled as he reached for his cup of palm wine. Obinna stayed silent. "And now," Ngozi continued, "our daughter is drawing pictures of a woman and a baby. She is whispering strange things at night. She said if she talks, someone will die." "Who, Obinna?" Who will die if she talks? Obinna stood up and walked away, breathing heavily. Ngozi sat still. That night, she couldn't sleep because something in her spirit made her realize that Adaeze was not mad. Instead, she remembered something. The next morning, while folding Adaeze's wrapper, Ngozi noticed something tucked into the small inner pocket of her daughter's old school bag. It was a piece of cloth, dated, stained, and written around a paper. The cloth looked familiar. It had a name stitched to the edge, Uloma. Ngozi's hands shook as she unfolded the paper. It was a torn page from a notebook with the words scribbled in Adaeze's handwriting. I saw Papa that night. He was digging in the banana grove. He didn't know I followed him. I saw him bury something. I don't know what it was, but I think it belonged to the woman who died. Ngozi dropped the notes and her heart pounded like a drum. Dear God, my child knows something. That evening, Obinna drank more than usual. He sat outside alone, staring at the darkness. His eyes were red, his body shaking. He remembered it all too clearly now. Uloma's scream, the blood, the baby's tiny foot twitching before it went still. He had thought it was buried forever, but now it was waking up. Later that week, the village catechist visited to pray for Adaeze. He sprinkled holy water, sang hymns, and even laid hands on her. Adaeze stared at him for a long time. Then she stood up, slowly walked towards her father, and said her full first sentence in this. If you touch me again, Papa, I will dig up what you buried. The whole compound went silent. Ngozi gasped. Obinna's drink slipped from his hand and shattered on the ground. What did you just say? He asked. Adaeze blinked, then fell to the floor, laughing like a mad person again, rolling, screaming, spitting. People shouted, but Ngozi didn't move because she heard it clearly. Her daughter had just threatened her husband with something real, something buried. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Ngozi lit a lantern and walked quietly towards the banana grove behind the shrine. She took a hoe with her. Her hands trembled as she dug into the red soil. In the third scoop, she hit something hard. She dug faster. Soon, she found a small wrapped bundle, old, rotting clothes, bones, and a necklace, and a baby's slippers. She covered her mouth to keep her from screaming. Then she stood up and walked home. Her daughter was not mad. Her husband was not innocent, and the time to expose everything had finally come. The next morning, the sun rose quietly over Umokoro village, but the air was heavy. Ngozi sat in the middle of the compound, her wrapper tied tightly around her chest. Her hands were folded, her eyes looked calm, but her soul was on fire. Adaeze sat beside her, still in silence, staring at the sky as always. Obinna came out of the house, adjusting his belt. What's going on? He asked. Ngozi looked at him and replied softly, We are waiting. Waiting for what? Ngozi didn't answer that. But not long after, the village gong sounded. Gong gong bam! Then came the voice of the town crier. Let all the elders and the men of honor gather at Obinna's compound. There is a matter of blood and shame to be revealed. Obinna froze. His knees weakened. He looked at Ngozi. She still didn't blink. Ngozi, what have you done? I gave the land what it asked for, and now it has spoken. By midday, the compound was full. Elders, youths, women, even Chief Okem had arrived, wearing his red cap and forced confidence. They sat in a circle. Obinna stood, sweating and shaking, breathing heavily. Ngozi stepped forward and held up the clothes she had dug up. My people, 17 years ago, Ngozi began, a widow named Uloma and her child died mysteriously. The crowd murmured. We were told it was a spiritual attack, but it was not. She unwrapped the clothes slowly and showed them the tiny slipper, the one with Obim stitched on it. Gasps filled the air. Chief Okem tried to stand. This is nonsense, he barked. But then Adaeze stood up. For the first time in weeks, her body was straight, her voice was firm, and her madness was gone. She looked at Chief Okem and said, You came to marry me, thinking you could have me like you helped destroy her. I saw you that night, both of you, in the mango grove. My father was digging and you were holding a lantern. You killed her husband because my father wanted Oloma. Then my father forced himself on her, and when she refused, she bled, the baby died, she died, and you buried her like an animal. The compound erupted with murmurs, shouts, screams, women covering their mouths. Chief Okem tried to run, but the youths blocked him. Obinna dropped to his knees. Sweat poured from his face. His chest rose and fell like a man gasping for air. Adaeze, please, don't. But she stared at him and said coldly, you were ready to sell me to keep your secret safe. By evening, the community had made their judgment. Chief Okem was stripped of his title. Obinna was banished from the village, his lands taken, his name erased from the family lineage. As he was dragged out of the compound, he looked back at Ngozi and Adaeze. You have destroyed me, he said. Ngozi replied, you destroyed yourself the day you touched a woman who said no. Adaeze turned away. She didn't cry. She had done enough of that. Weeks later, Adaeze stood under the same tree where she once sat, laughing like a mad girl. This time, she wore clean clothes. Her hair was neat. Her back was straight. Children passed and greeted her with respect. A woman from the village said, that girl has been through fire and she didn't burn. Ngozi came outside smiling. The world now sees you, my daughter, not as a mad girl, but as the one who refused to be silenced. And Adaeze said softly, I only did what Oloma's spirit asked of me, to speak. The moral lesson of this story lets us know that Adaeze's story reminds us that silence is not always weakness, and madness is not always madness. Sometimes, what we call madness is a shield, a way to survive in a world that refuses to listen to truth. This story teaches us that forcing young girls into marriage, especially for selfish gain, is not tradition, it is betrayal. No child should be treated like a property. Every child deserves protection, not sacrifice. It also reminds us that secrets, no matter how deeply buried, will always rise. A crime covered in silence will one day speak through the voice of the innocent. As teachers, as leaders, as a society, we must learn to listen, to protect the weak, to face the truth no matter how shameful it is, because when justice sleeps, pain wakes up in another generation. Let us raise children who we will not be afraid of when they grow up and begin to speak.